So we are starting a series on prayer, and my hope and prayer about the series on prayer is that our perspective and our expectation will be broadened beyond whatever it is currently. And maybe you happen to have the perfect perspective, I don't know. But I think in so many cases, it's not that we have an incorrect view of prayer. Often it's an incomplete view. It might not be less than what you think it is, but I think often it is so much more. What I mean by that is that maybe, in a very oversimplified sense, we might think that prayer is asking God for stuff. It might be the intercession, which it is. It might be warfare, which it is. It might be thanking God for it is. It's worship. It is. It's not less than this, but it is so much more. And my hope is that we would catch a vision, and that something would be genuinely, supernaturally, spiritually stirred, that we would sense God inviting us to be with Him, inviting us to enjoy Him, inviting us to actually access the friendship and the relationship that is available and that is so far beyond words, that is so far beyond activity and productivity, where we would get to enjoy the relationship with Him that we've been created for. That we would see Him not only as healer and provider, which is wonderful, but that we would also see Him as Father and friend. Yeah. It stands out to me that when Jesus' disciples, and at this stage they weren't convinced of who He was, that He's the Son of God, that He's the Messiah. At this point, they were mostly seeing Him as a rabbi, a teacher, a discipler. This wasn't uncommon. 2,000 years ago in the Middle East, there would have been lots of rabbis, lots of religious leaders, and they would have seen lots of prayer taking place. Chances are, I'm guessing, it would have been very religious. It would have been very rigorous. It would have been quite formulaic. I'm guessing that when they got to see people praying, it was probably quite articulate, quite profound, maybe even impressive. In fact, they would have even had some religious people walking around with like boxes tied to their arms, which had all the prayers in it, and where they wanted to look really spiritual and powerful. And yet, they saw something different in the way that Jesus prayed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have asked Him to teach them how to pray. They would have seen a whole lot of modeling going on. They were like, no, Jesus, we want to pray like you pray. There's something a little extra about the way you pray, and I don't want you to miss out. Literally, I just want to highlight half of one verse when Jesus then goes on to respond to their request, and we've become, in many cases, so familiar with what is called the Lord's Prayer that we might rush past the very first part, which is so important. In Matthew 6, verse 9a, so literally just the very beginning, it says, pray like this. He's saying, pray like this, our Father in heaven. Yeah. That's it, just pause. Our Father in heaven. If we can see that as the invitation, if we can see that as the privilege, if we can see that as the starting point, before He is our miracle worker, before He is our life coach, before He is our AI, give me whatever I need, I want to be able to do like a quick search and I want the answers from you. Before he's anything else He's able to do, He is our Father. Now, I'm very aware that for some people, in fact, many, I'm guessing, this wouldn't be a helpful analogy, and I'll address that in a few moments. But He is a loving, caring, personal, interested Father. Then it says, our Father who is in heaven. That word heaven, if you actually go and do a study on the original word that it's translated as heaven in our English Bibles, it could be the word air could be used, which I don't think is a coincidence. I think it's referring to the fact that He is all around us. He is our Father. He is all around us. In other words, it is personal and present. Our Father, our God, who we get to pray to, Ryan, is both personal and present. If there's nothing else that you are inspired to do as you leave here today, my hope and my prayer is that you would have a desire to be present to God being present to you. That we would see prayer as being so much more than just another exercise, something else that we have to do, another box to tick. And again, it includes that. It's not less than that. But that we would see it as being so much more. That we would see it as when our talking stops, that the presence continues. Amen. When asking stops, the presence continues. When the conscious, deliberate, focused thanksgiving stops, that His presence continues. That when the worship stops, His presence continues. I don't know about you, but today for me, worship, which normally has 2 syllables, had 3 syllables today. It was worship. And I'm saying after meditating on and reflecting on truths about God and just enjoying Him and loving Him and responding to Him, after that, His presence continues. After some of the emotions that you may or may not have experienced have gone, you can still walk with a sense of His presence, that He is personal, that He is all around. I don't have an issue with people praying this. I just don't think that it's necessarily theologically correct when people ask God to be with me or to be with us. I don't think that it's not wrong. It's just, again, I don't think it's accurate because I think God is with us. God is with me. I think a more important prayer is, God, would you help me to be present to you? Help me to remove distractions. Help me to focus my mind. Help me to recognize or to sense or to be reassured. God is present. He is personal, and we have the privilege of actually walking in, living in that presence regardless of how we are feeling or what we are doing. It is relationship before function. It is relationship before responsibility. Now, function is important if it's as a result of. Responsibility is really important. You've been created with a purpose to serve this side of eternity, but it's as a result of, in response to relationship. So even in a ministry context or a Christian context, when our doing for God outweighs our being with Him, we burn out. We become miserable. We become tired. We then start looking to other people to fill that need for reassurance and appreciation and gratitude, as opposed to everything being a response to God. And if someone happens to appreciate it, well, great, that's gravy. But the anchor is that I am present to my personal God. He is our Father. And Scripture even tells us that He is our friend, which might be such a weird thought for many of us. Jesus is quoted as saying in John 15, verse 15, I no longer call you servants because the servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. Think about that for a moment. That's pretty hectic, like in a good way. He's called us friends. In fact, I really wrestled over even just the title for this message, or kind of what to try and really dig down into, because part of it was I wanted to focus on how we are invited to enjoy God. I know that can really mess with a lot of our heads, but I don't feel like it's the full picture, or that we are invited to a friendship with God. But even that, I think, has limitations. And so that's why I've simply settled on presence. We're invited every moment of every day, whether we're sleeping, whether we're awake, whether we are trying to please Him or completely trying to ignore Him. The invitation, prayer is the invitation to be with God. To be present to a God who is present to us. Take a look at some of these verses in Psalms. Psalm 16, verse 8. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for He is right beside me. That's very personal. Psalm 23, verse 4. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. David, who wrote Psalm 23, isn't saying that when I walk through a dark season, a dark valley, that you give me all the answers and therefore I'm reassured. No, he says, no, you are close beside me. Think about a child who is scared or is going through a tough time. They're not actually looking for the parent to explain scientifically and philosophically why they're going through what they're going through. They are reassured by the parent's presence. Yeah. It could be dark. They still don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what all's out there. But if a healthy parent is close by, there's like a... I believe that for many of us, if we walk with Jesus long enough, if you haven't already experienced this, that you will experience a season or seasons where you experience the fact that understanding why whatever's happening is happening doesn't remove the pain, but that we can have peace when we experience His presence. In other words, when we are hurting, when we are grieving, when there's mystery, when we don't know what the next season holds, yes, we think if we just knew, if we just understood, it'll all be better. No, it won't, because you can still understand why crime took place or why an injustice took place. And you can understand the theology of fallen man and free will and all these things, and that we live in a greedy, all that stuff. You can understand it. That's not going to give you peace. But to know that in spite of all of that, you have a personal, heavenly Father who's paying attention to you, who's present to you. It is possible for us to have a peace that Paul in Philippians 4 verse 7 says passes understanding. In other words, it's irrational. It goes beyond just understanding. You are close beside me. Psalm 139, this is again David writing, verse 3 to 7 says, you see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. For some of us, that's like, ugh, that's not great news. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and you follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. And I wonder, in fact, next Sunday, we're going to be sharing a testimony that I'm hoping is in part going to help you recognize where maybe in your life you haven't been able to get away from the presence of God. Where maybe either you've been ignorant to it or you've even tried, you flat out tried to get away. But where you'll recognize that He hasn't stopped pursuing you. We can keep rejecting Him, but where we realize that He is still present to us, inviting, offering, making known. Adam and Eve, when they sinned, they hid. They didn't go looking for God. God went looking for them. I mean, not that He was looking like He didn't know, like He lost the Apple tag. He knew where they were, but He pursued them. Luke 10, verse 39 to 42, we read about quite a well-known passage where Jesus is visiting Mary and Martha at the home of Lazarus, and it says in verse 39 that Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what He taught. There's something about sitting. There's something, it helps us to be present just a little bit more when we're sitting. I'm not saying sitting without a device. I mean, like without a device. To sit, to be in close proximity, to listen. But, like many of us, myself, way too often, Martha was distracted. She was distracted by what she had to get done for Jesus. She came to Jesus and said to Him, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. And I just want to point out to you that often when we're not sitting with God, because there isn't that peace, because there isn't that reassurance, we can find ourselves telling Him what to do, telling Him what to tell other people to do, trying to make Him make other people, because we're not experiencing that peace that actually comes from His presence. But the Lord said to my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken from her. Mary was sitting, paying attention, close, listening. Martha was distracted. There was nothing wrong with Martha wanting to host. Nothing wrong with that. It was that she was distracted. And then the last passage from the book of Psalms, chapter 46, verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still. Scholars interpret that term, "be still," which was written originally in Hebrew to mean let go. Some have argued that you can take it even further, saying let go of the grip. Let go of the grip. What is that thing that you're holding on to? What is that thing that you're so distracted by, obsessed with? And again, it could be completely valid, but we are invited to let go, even if it's just for a moment. To let go and to know that He is God. And that word know speaks of intimacy. It is not just a knowledge that is purely cerebral, that is academic. It is a knowing like you would get to know a close friend that you pay attention to, that you do life with, that you have different experiences with. We are invited to be still and to actually get to know Him relationally, where we see Him as so much more than just a gimmick, so much more than just a genie, so much more than just someone that we hope will give us what we want. There's so much more that is available to us if we will see prayer as so much more than just certain aspects. It's not less than them, but it is so much more than them. We are invited to begin with and to facilitate relationship. Now, practically, how? How do we facilitate? We cannot manipulate God, but we can facilitate ourselves being present to Him. We can facilitate enjoying that relationship with Him. And I would say that it simply comes down to two important, you can call them principles or practices. The one is priority. We've got a clock up here just to illustrate the fact that if something matters to us, we're going to prioritize time. We're going to be intentional. There's going to be a plan involved. We're going to carve out 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever the case is. But we're going to be intentional. So there is a plan. It is a priority. But also there's a place. Now, you might not have a chair that you can sort of guarantee to sit in every day. People are living in incredibly different living circumstances. But there might be a plan where you say, you know what? I think that it's going to work most naturally during my lunch break to actually go and sit in that park, or to go and, if you're working close to the beach, maybe you go take a look at a nice view, or where there is no option for something nice to look at, so you just go and find as quiet a place as possible. And yes, in case you're thinking, Jason, that's a wonderful pipe dream, I live in chaos. I travel on public transport where there's a whole bunch of noise, and where I work and where I can take a break, it's all just noisy. Then I want to encourage you to get a pair of earphones. And again, I'm not saying that there's any magic trick to this, but where you do what you can, you might be surprised at how God does what you can't. And so you can only facilitate yourself trying to be present. You can't manipulate it, you can't guarantee it, you can just facilitate. So maybe on your way to work or school, maybe you put your earphones in for 10 minutes and you put on some white noise or brown noise or whatever the case is, and you just try to be present to God being present to you. And it could be as simple as maybe reflecting through the Lord's Prayer. Or maybe you don't even want to reflect through the whole of the Lord's Prayer. You're just going to sit for the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes just with the first line. Our Father, who is all around us. Our Father, you are my Father. You are my heavenly Dad. Please, would you help me to see the truth about who you are? You are my Father. And again, it's okay to not have to be using words. It's okay to just sit and to just try and be aware that right now, whether you feel it or not, whether anything significant is taking place or not, that God is with you. Maybe you're being pushed. Maybe there's chaos happening. I mean, try not to miss your stop. But What I'm saying is, be creative. Just try stuff. Yeah. Try to have a priority. Try to have a place. And I'm very aware that this is different for different people. For some people, the morning would be the worst time to do it. You're more of a night owl. Then I'm saying, learn something from the Hebrew culture, where they see the day as starting the night before. That's why for people in Hebrew culture, the idea of Sabbath begins at sunset the night before. So maybe you know that first thing in the morning is not going to be a great time for you. You just need to be able to get up, get done, get going. So then maybe at night you carve out a little time. Whatever that is. If you're starting out, I'm saying start with 2 minutes. If you've been doing 2 minutes for a while, go to 5. If you've been doing 5 minutes for a while, go to 10. If you've been doing 10 for a while, go to 15. If you've been doing 15 for a while, I think it'll naturally grow from there. But where you're saying, God, this matters. This is a priority. I'm not going to wait for you to just meet me like you met Paul on the road to Damascus. I'm not going to wait for some supernatural encounter. I've already encountered you. I'm going to do what I can to facilitate being present to you for a very specific period of time with a plan. I'm going to prioritize it in the hope that helps me to be present to you the rest of the day. So it's not either or. It's not that you can only meet with God in some rigid box. No, it's not that at all. I actually think for the most part, God wants us to be present to Him for 95% of the time, where it's not this conscious exercise, but where it's more organic. So we become more and more aware of His presence because we are consistently focusing our attention for part of the day. Does it make sense? I want to point out. Are you ready for this? Not Jason. Jesus needed time with the Father. Yeah. Jesus needed time with the Father. Jesus, who was performing miracles, who was discipling His people, who was doing wonderful things, He needed to carve out time to move away from the busyness, to move away from people, to move away. When John the Baptist is killed, he tries to get away to go and grieve with the Father. And then people chase him down and they follow him. And then he's so gracious and compassionate. He then does, okay, fine, we'll feed you, does a bunch of miracles, and then tries to move on to the next place. Before he appoints his 12, what we call them, disciples or apostles, like the Binakran, he spends the whole night quietly in prayer. He didn't just send them for personality assessments and get some, psychometric testing back. He'd already been doing life with them. He needed time with the Father. That's right. Every time he gave out. Now, do I think he was present to God throughout his day? I think he was. He still says, I don't do anything that the Father doesn't show me. But in addition, I think it was those moments in the quiet. It was the 40 days in the desert before he started his public ministry as well. It was these different moments that I think helped him to remain present to the Father, being present to Him the rest of the day. He needed it. So I want to encourage you to think of a plan. Whether or not you're fortunate enough to have a chair that you can use every evening or every morning, or whether or not you have to rely on earphones. And I really do think that it's possible for us to be present to God more than we realize, like in a focused way. There are even times where at the gym, if I'm doing something that's just monotonous, that I don't have to balance or think about. If I'm on the elliptical, I can put some white noise, brown noise. For me, brown noise helps more. And I can actually just pray. I can just be present. I can actually pay attention to God. You might be surprised. But I want to encourage you to have a daily plan, to have a weekly plan. This is an example of a weekly plan. Where whether you feel like it or not, you're saying, you know what? Sundays, I'm going to go and worship and receive. And maybe, just maybe every now and then, it'll be worship. And maybe, just maybe every now and then, it'll be a preach. But we're positioning ourselves. We're not holding God to ransom. We're not trying to manipulate Him. It's a priority. So we have a daily plan priority. We have a weekly plan priority. Maybe that's life group for you. For us, it's every second week. That's part of that's just one more way that helps me to be present to God. Because I don't know if you've noticed that when you're talking to other people that are interested in God about stuff that is common to you and you're trying to hear God in it, that you actually become more aware of God's presence in your conversation. And that's what the Bible calls fellowship. It's more than just socializing. You're present to God. I love, where possible, I can't always do it every week, but I love it if possible. That if I can get out to Newlands for a bit of a hike, I love being out in the nature. I love being out with the beauty. If my family can go with, wonderful. I'll try and take our dog with, who's a hooligan, but I actually enjoy him enjoying nature. And for me, that helps me to be present to God. I've discovered that even when it comes to our annual vacation, that it gives me extra space, less rushed space to be, to pray, to think, to reflect. Let's make it a priority. Let's have a plan. Daniel, from Daniel and the Lion's Den, not Lion King, Lion's Den fame, was thrown into the Lion's Den because of his plan. Because it was a priority for him to stop 3 times a day and to actually connect with God. Now, I can't help doubting whether or not Daniel would have had the depth and the strength of conviction to trust God in the lion's den if he hadn't already had that plan. If he wasn't connecting with God intentionally morning, noon, and night, I don't know if he would have felt God's presence when he was facing the biggest anxiety of his life. Right? I don't know about you, but when I'm under pressure, that quickly reveals what's been sown, what's been banked, what's gone in there. Am I reacting like someone that's got no relationship with God, or am I sensing some peace in spite of the anxiety and the uncertainty and all the rest? Let's have a plan. I'm going to ask the worship team to come up and join me, please. While they're doing that, I want to leave you with one more thought, and one invitation/challenge. The thought is this. Many of you might be aware of the fact that time is translated from the Greek words. We'll use the same English word, but it can be translated from the word chronos and from the word kairos. Chronos is the Greek word where we get the term, chronology or chronological. It's factual, so it's the time of day, it's the date, it's the year that we're in. So it's measured, it's tangible. Is the rest of our worship team joining us? Okay, I'm sure they're going to be there soon. It's kind of like this measurable, tangible time. We kind of have control in some cases, to some extent, over the chronos time in our lives. But the term kairos is actually referring to more of a moment. It's difficult to translate. It's a special moment. I can remember a kairos moment when I met Sue at the sprightly age of 22, and she walked into a leaders meeting wearing a dress, and I was like, hello. That was a kairos moment. There was a date, there was a time, we had a meeting, but there was a moment. There have been many moments in our lives, and I must say that most of the moments, the kairos moments that we have had, have not been manufactured. We haven't been able to guarantee them. They've often been a surprise because of the chronological facilitation. When we have created time to just be together, or when we have gone away as a family to do something special, or to go on holiday, whatever the case is, it's amazing to me how we've been surprised at times with things that we couldn't have planned for, things that we couldn't have made happen. But because we carved out the chronos time, we experienced the kairos moments. And that's been the same for me in my relationship with God. I am so grateful for the kairos moments. For that moment 30 years ago where I felt like I met with God in a life-changing way. But then there were a million little chronos moments after that. And in between, there'd be the occasional kairos moment as I would try and carve out time for God, as I would try and serve, as I would engage in fellowship, and I want to encourage you that the more we are committed to chronos moments, to carving out time, It doesn't have to be heroic. Make it something small and short that you can keep consistent, that is achievable. As we do what we can, as we make it a priority, as we have a plan, as we try and create a place where possible, the same place every day, I think you might just be surprised at how every now and then you might actually experience that Kairos moment where you sense God whispering to you, where you sense God directing your thoughts. And I imagine that all of us want to hear from God. I imagine that all of us want God's perspective. We want His plan. Guys, we get there by doing what we can with the Chronos moments, which in turn help us to live being more and more present to His presence. And then every now and then, by His grace and mercy, we actually get to hear or to see His activity, to sense something. It is worth it. And so this is the challenge. This is the challenge for this week. I want to encourage you to practice being present to His presence. Practice being present to His presence. So whether or not it's a case of finding that spot where you can just try and sit as close as possible to the same time every day. Maybe it literally just starts off as simply as God. For 2 minutes, you just sit with the question of God, please help me to be present to you. Please help me to be present to you. Whether I feel anything or not, help me to pay attention. Help me to accept that you are with me. Help me to be present to you. And you don't have to keep saying it. You can just sit with it. You can just sit, and your hands don't have to be up. Although I think that's a posture of surrender and receiving. But it can just be, preferably your feet flat on the floor. Just, God, help me to be present to you. And maybe you do that for 2 minutes. And you do it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And if you're someone that's already in a healthy prayer routine, maybe you add. So maybe you pray every morning, or maybe you pray every evening, and so you carve out your Chronos moments. Then I would suggest maybe take a leaf out of Daniel's book and maybe add another slot. Before you go into a meeting, you just sit. God, help me to be present to you. Before you go into that test, God, help me to be present to you being present to me. Would you give me your peace? Would you help me to be calm? Help me to think clearly. Does this make sense? Guys, we are invited. We are invited to be present to a personal God, to a God who is present to us. So I want to invite you to stand with us for a few moments. Before we end off with the song one more time, please can I encourage you just to stand still, to close your eyes. It just helps you to focus. It helps you not to look around, not to be mindful of what's going on around you. And if you're willing to do this, you just open your hands. And just for a few moments, can you just, in your mind, or maybe you even whisper it, you mouth it, God, help me to be present to you. God, help me to be present to you. You are my Father. You are all around me. Help me to be present to you. And you can maybe just hold on to that prayer, or maybe you need to repeat that. That's up to you. But I do want to encourage you. This is not a personality-driven thing. This is not a stage of maturity thing. And I even want to take it a step further and say, even if you're not in a relationship with God, I would encourage you to pray something like it. We're saying, God, if you're real, if what that guy is saying is true, please make me aware of your presence. Help me to be present to you. If you're real, help me to be present to you. Help me to sense your heart. They talk about you being good. Would you please help me to sense you being good? Help me to be present to you. Father, I pray in Jesus' name that as we're going to our week, please would you help us to be more mindful, more aware of the invitation to be present to your presence. The invitation to be present to you being present to us. The invitation to be present to this personal Heavenly Father, wonderful Counselor, mighty God, Prince of Peace, Lord of heaven's armies. So powerful yet so personal. Knowing all things yet caring about personal, intimate things. God, would you help us to recognize where maybe you're not inviting us to do less? Maybe we're already in a routine in terms of the work of prayer and the petition and the gratitude and the worship. Help us to recognize, God, where you're not asking us to pick either or, but would you help us to make sure that we are including time to just be with you. To resist that temptation that tells us that we're only as good as what we produce. That we're only valuable to you if we are performing. That we only get your attention if we are getting stuff done. Lord, would you please help us to fight against those inaccuracies? That we would keep coming back to the fact that we are loved first. That we are wanted first. That we are forgiven before we even ask you to forgive us. That it all starts with you and that everything else is a response. Help us, God, please, to recognize your heart, your invitation, and to do what we can to be present to your presence. In Jesus' name I pray.